Welcome back to the Naughty Corner. After covering the utter muff-up that was February 10, what strategy did the police turn to in order to proceed? Well, according to the report, negotiation was a big part of the game plan. So let's see how that went down. A tactical commander is cited as saying, "Central to everything that we did was negotiation. We had to negotiate our way out of this, because we'd tried to arrest our way out." In a section titled Part 6, the police operation from 11 February to 1 March, we find that the police's core strategy was negotiation, and the report emphasises this multiple times. Paragraph 405 outlines the following. The team developed a concept plan for a 3-phase ongoing operation. Firstly, negotiation. Then if that didn't work, disruption, moving cars, upsetting and disrupting supply chains to encourage negotiation. And finally, continuing negotiation, through to a final operation to bring the occupation to an end. It looks like everything hinged on diplomacy for the boys in blue, so let's take a gander to see how that was executed, shall we? The police have a group called the Advanced Police Negotiations Team, henceforth referred to as the APNT. Paragraph 462 to 476 of the report tell us what the APNT got up to during the protest, so here's a very abridged breakdown. Feb 8 to 13, APNT had no organised engagement or negotiation with protest leaders. Feb 13, Leighton Baker was identified as a protest spokesperson. The relieving local commander met with him alone. APNT offered to brief the relieving local commander and attend the meeting, but they were not taken up on the offer. Feb 15, the Deputy Commissioner of Iwi and Communities met with the Wellington pastor of Destiny Church, a meeting which other protest leaders like Leighton Baker were aware of, but APNT were not. That evening, having allegedly come to an agreement about moving some vehicles, the pastor tried to contact the Deputy Commissioner but was unable to do so, and so he contacted the APNT instead. However, they had no advice or information to give him. Feb 16, the Deputy Commissioner and an inspector from his team met with the pastor to get general information. The pastor was later contacted by APNT, who had been unaware of the earlier meeting and had no knowledge of what was discussed. The following day, the pastor told APNT he was confused about who he should be dealing with and queried whether it should be them or the Deputy Commissioner. Feb 17. APNT told the protest leaders that they wanted to organise a face-to-face meeting between police and their nominated spokespeople. Later that day, Leighton Baker contacted APNT saying he and the pastor had been nominated for that purpose. Also on 17 February, information was passed to the Commissioner that a prominent mediator based in Wellington had details of a contact person for Voices for Freedom, a lawyer based in Melbourne, Australia. This was on the day the Speaker of the House announced that no politician would speak with protesters. Feb 18, the Deputy Commissioner Strategy and Service contacted this Melbourne-based lawyer, and for almost 2 weeks through until the 1st of March, there was regular, mostly daily, text and phone communications between them. No notes were taken and details of the communications were not provided to APNT. The Deputy Commissioner claims that briefings were given daily to the Wellington City Council and could have been passed on to the police negotiations team. Feb 20, a face-to-face meeting took place between Leighton Baker, the pastor, the lawyer remotely, both Deputy Commissioners, the APNT coordinator, and the Chief of Staff to the local controller. There was discussion about traffic management, the health and safety of protesters, their access to food and toilets, and other matters. Despite this being their first meeting with anyone, APNT was concerned that the protest leaders had lost control because there was protester backlash to the installation of bollards which their leaders had agreed to. APNT themselves received calls from their own contacts unhappy about the move, but that didn't seem to count as ebbing control for some reason. Feb 22, the Human Rights Commissioner hosted a meeting with several of the protest leaders. An inspector from the Iwi and Communities team attended, but not APNT, who were uninformed of the meeting. Feb 23, the Mayor of Wellington hosted a meeting with several protesters. The Deputy Commissioner of Iwi and Communities and an inspector from his team attended. Again, APNT was left in the dark and so didn't attend. Feb 24, the Wellington pastor and another Destiny Church pastor met with the Deputy Commissioner Iwi and Communities and local Iwi leaders at Pipitea Marae. Again, APNT were in the dark and didn't attend. The report says that it was at this time police decided engaging and negotiating was pointless. The way it's stated is that the police viewed the protest as in the hands of people with no particular agenda. So after attending just one meeting, the negotiations team threw in the towel. It's amazing that with that kind of resolve, they weren't able to move peaceful people off a lawn back on the 10th of Feb. What's even more confusing about this decision is that protesters were only there to negotiate. They were hardly trying to storm Parliament, they wanted someone to talk to. Evidence of this is found in paragraph 479, where it is revealed that it was protest leaders that approached the Human Rights Commissioner, which resulted in their meeting on the 22nd of February. Again in paragraph 482, we learned that the day before that, on the 21st, a protester who was also a member of the local iwi brought more than 20 protest leaders and protesters to Pipitea Marae. They talked for a couple of hours there, airing numerous and varied issues and grievances. The mayor was able to have a couple of meetings with protesters, but for some reason the police gave up after just one. It was also the protesters, specifically Voices for Freedom, that had engaged the Wellington-based mediator, and by extension the Melbourne-based lawyer. He, that is the mediator, was contacted by the Commissioner, who simply passed over the lawyer's details. The mediator expected to be contacted further and could have potentially assisted the protest groups and police to formulate an engagement plan or strategy. Police accept that they didn't explore this possibility, and that was an oversight on their part. As is well known, it wasn't just the APNT not negotiating with protesters. Politicians whose ear the crowd had come to court famously ignored them also, and the report makes mention of this. There was no engagement between the protest leaders and cabinet ministers or any members of parliament apart from the leader of the ACT Party, who met with a group of protesters on the 16th of February. The protest leaders sought such engagement, and this was one of their main aims. They raised this with police, other agencies, and through the media. The Prime Minister did not meet with the protesters, and in the report it is claimed that one of the reasons is because of the direct threats made to her by the group. Though how this happened when she never interacted with them is not explained. In fact, a combined statement from groups at the protest had been sent to Parliament on Monday the 14th and contained the following line: "The protest is a result of immense frustration and concern. People are outraged at the conduct of the government and its lack of respect, dismissive attitude and unwillingness to engage." Almost as if a self-fulfilling prophecy, this letter was not engaged with, but rather ignored. Instead, a joint statement signed by all parties in Parliament was released a few days later, on Thursday the 17th, agreeing that they would not talk to protesters until they returned to being lawful. That is, they removed their vehicles and tents. It was assumed by protesters that this attempt to move them wasn't made in good faith, as the convoy was at least the 8th time protesters made their presence felt at Parliament regarding COVID regulations. All of them had been peaceful and none had ever garnered a response. 2 months prior, on December 16, about 3,000 individuals had marched from Civic Square through Wellington CBD to Parliament grounds. Now, I didn't mean to come across as belittling of the APNT as a unit or as individual staff, but it seems that someone making calls was choosing not to involve them. It was either that or another instance of gross incompetence, but either way the frustration of the APNT themselves was sometimes palpable in the report. APNT was only brought in on the 13th of February, which was 6 days after the start of the protest and after the attempt on the 10th of February to clear protesters from the lawn in front of Parliament House. For 5 days, police had put limited resources into developing an engagement strategy or communicating with protesters. As a result, when APNT did try and engage, police were already at a disadvantage. We read this from an APNT coordinator. A lot of information was being passed back to me from the OCPNT about conversations that were being had with subjects on the phone, and the theme across all of these conversations was that the spokespeople were having conversations and physical meetings with senior police members that we weren't aware of, which is effectively just cutting us out of the loop and making it very difficult. I feel for that guy, and ultimately the report acknowledges police negotiations were a failure. It states police should have formulated a clear communication and engagement strategy and plan with roles and responsibilities outlined, and should have supported the trained advanced police negotiation team in leading the engagement with protest groups. Throughout the duration of the protest, there was no documented communication and engagement strategy setting out the goals, tasks and responsibilities. We would have expected a comprehensive communication and engagement strategy to be quickly developed and documented as a crucial feature of such an event. While there may have been some relationships established, overall the police engagement was not a success. They had no overarching strategy or detailed plan with designated roles and responsibilities. Engagement with protesters should have been attempted from the first day of the protest in a meaningful way. The main problem I have is that negotiation is cited so many times as the core strategy of police in the report, and it really gives a false impression if you take it on board without realising the police negotiation team only ever attended one meeting with protest leaders. That is misleading, a lot like constantly calling the protest conduct on February 10th violent without court convictions, evidence, or even descriptions of how it happened to back that up. That is misleading, sure, But what is bad is how the nation was brought to the point of such a protest, because politicians wouldn't listen or engage with the people they were supposed to represent. This episode has highlighted the poor police negotiations, but much more appalling is that all the parties currently sitting in Parliament signed an agreement not to engage with those New Zealanders that were desperately trying to force an engagement with them by camping on their lawn. That's definitely something we should be considering, with our next election only about 50 days away. That's all for now. Catch you next episode when we dive into conduct and reactions focused on the time between February 10th and the eventual violent conclusion of the occupation on March 2nd.